Ashford Castle was burning that night. Hundreds of candles, crystal chandeliers, silver candelabras. From the outside, the castle looked like a living ember itself, trembling, alive, dangerous in the heart of a dark winter night. But Eleanor Voss was not looking from the outside. She was inside, brought in through a side entrance, not the guest doors, but the narrow stone corridor used by servants. With a single suitcase, no one had spoken her name. No one had said, "Welcome." An old butler had simply walked ahead, and Eleanor had followed in silence. When she stepped into the grand hall, she stopped. 150 people. All of them were there. The oldest families of Devonshire, lords from London, ladies with diamond brooches, young girls in white gloves, crystal glasses in their hands. The music had just stopped, as if a signal had been given, at the exact moment Eleanor entered through the door. And 150 pairs of eyes turned toward her. Eleanor clasped her hands together. Inside her white gloves, her nails pressed slowly into her palms. She felt the pain. It helped her stay still. They're watching, she thought. Let them watch. The man at the head of the table had not yet turned. Black coat, broad shoulders, unmoving, as if he were the only fixed point in the room, and everything else revolved around him. Rumors called him the Mad Duke. 3 fiancés had fled. One claimed a nervous breakdown. Another had moved to Scotland, never explaining why. Eleanor did not care about any of that. She would go to a monster to save Cecily. The man turned. Eleanor had expected an angry look, a cold assessment, perhaps disdain. She was ready for those. She had rehearsed it in her mind. Look, evaluate, leave. But the Duke of Ashford did not look at her face. He looked into her eyes and stayed there. A long silence. Long enough for everyone to notice. Then the Duke stepped away from the head of the table. 1 step, 2 steps. He came to stand directly in front of Eleanor. The crowd parted without being told, without being pushed. He spoke quietly. But the hall was so silent that every word rang clear as crystal. This woman has been sent here as a sacrifice. No one breathed. I do not take sacrifices. Eleanor's father, Sir Edmund Voss, hair perfectly combed, waistcoat pressed, his smile hiding his debts, seated at the left corner of the table, stood up. He opened his mouth. The Duke did not look at him. He looked only at Eleanor. His voice did not change. The same tone. The same weight. Whoever forced you to come here, whether in this hall or outside it, from this moment, my name is your shield. Do you understand? Eleanor studied him. There was no anger in his eyes, no pity either. Something else. Something she recognized but could not name. Then she understood. Anger. Controlled, compressed over years, cold. I understand, said Eleanor. Her voice did not tremble. The hall began to murmur. Glasses chimed. Edmund Voss sat down. Slowly, as if his knees could no longer hold him. Someone coughed. The music resumed, hesitant, uncertain. We'll take a very short break. If you don't want to miss new stories, please subscribe to the channel. But Eleanor was still looking at the Duke, and there was only one question in her mind. This man knows everything. Her father's plan, the documents, the debts, all of it. It was written on his face. Then why is he protecting her? There will be a price. Every protection has a price. But tonight, she would not ask that question. Among 150 people in the grand hall, with her single suitcase, brought in through a side door, Eleanor Voss stood straight for the first time. And beneath the oldest chandelier of Ashford Castle, before the eyes of the oldest families, the Duke of Ashford stepped back and made way for Eleanor to pass. But that night, Eleanor thought only one thing. Why is this man protecting me? 3 weeks earlier, the Voss estate stood on a hill above a small town in Devonshire, as if looking down on it, politely, slightly disdainful. From the outside, everything was in place. Painted iron gates, polished marble steps, a uniformed butler at the door, only one, but positioned as if an entire staff stood behind him. Lace curtains in the windows, trimmed hedges in the garden, the house of a wealthy family. But Eleanor Voss knew the truth from the inside. She had painted those gates herself. She had scrubbed the marble steps. The butler's uniform was borrowed. The lace curtains were from her mother's dowry, unsold, only because no buyer had been found. And the hedges were trimmed, yes, but the fence around the vegetable garden had been broken for 2 months, and no one had fixed it. The difference between looking wealthy and being wealthy, that was the difference, and Eleanor had known it since she was 8. The night her mother died. A cold January night. The doctor arrived late because Edmund Voss had argued over the fee at the door for minutes. That was the night Eleanor understood. In this house, appearance was everything. Reality was hidden in the kitchen. That morning Eleanor was in the kitchen. Mrs. Hobart, the cook, stout, kind, always with flour on her cheeks, stood at the counter. When Eleanor entered, the woman did not look at her. She wiped her hands on her apron, then lowered her voice. "My lady." "What is it, Mrs. Hobart?" The woman did not answer immediately. She looked out the window, as if the words might leak through the walls. "The butcher isn't coming tomorrow. Master didn't pay last month's bill. And the butcher—" She stopped. "I didn't know what to do, my lady." Eleanor waited a moment. Then she reached into the pocket of her apron. There was a small cloth pouch, her own savings. Money she had earned from sewing, the shillings she had saved from giving French lessons to a neighbor's daughter. She placed the pouch on the counter. "Get through this week. Use more bone, less meat. My father won't notice." Mrs. Hobart looked at the pouch, then at Eleanor. Her eyes filled, but she did not cry. She only lowered her head. "If it weren't for you, my lady—" "I am here," said Eleanor. "Go on." She left the kitchen. She told no one. She heard the piano while she was on the stairs. It came from upstairs, from Cecily's room. 3 notes correct, the 4th slipping. Again, then laughter. The kind that laughs at its own mistake, never angry, untouched by the world. Eleanor stopped, listened. Cecily was 18, blonde, inherited from their mother, pink-cheeked, because she had never known pain. She sang in the mornings, read novels in the afternoons, played the piano in the evenings, played it badly, but laughing. And she did not know what anything in this house truly was. She did not know about the debts. She did not know the full story of their mother's death. She did not know where their father went at night, or why his hands trembled in the morning. Eleanor had kept it that way. This innocence must be protected, she had thought for years, at least for a little longer. But as she climbed the stairs, a thought passed through her. Sharp, brief, painful. For how long? Her father's study door was closed that morning. A closed door meant Edmund Voss was occupied. When he was occupied, he was either counting promissory notes or calculating money that had yet to arrive. Eleanor paused as she passed. No voices came from inside, but beneath the door, through a thin gap, the sound of paper. Then the cork of a whiskey bottle. Then a long silence. Edmund Voss was reading something. Carefully. Eleanor walked on. But that afternoon, by chance, truly by chance, she saw a letter left open on her father's desk from the Duke of Ashford, dated 3 months earlier. She managed to read a single line. Edmund entered, closed the door. But that one line was enough. I am not seeking your younger daughter, but your elder one. Eleanor froze. Then her face smoothed. She looked at her father. Edmund looked at her. Neither spoke a word. That night, Eleanor sat in her room for a long time. She did not think. It was too early to think. She only felt. And what she felt was anger. Pure, cold, useful anger. At the Voss estate, everything was in place, from the outside. But Eleanor Voss knew how to look from within. And from within, there was only one truth. Her father had been corresponding with the Duke of Ashford for 3 months, and he had not said a single word to her. Why? 2 days later, Edmund Voss summoned his daughter. It was not morning. It was evening. That mattered. Edmund held his important conversations in the evening. Mornings, he was tired, irritable, uncontrolled. Evenings, after 2 glasses of whiskey, he was cold, composed, calculated. That was far more dangerous. When Eleanor entered the study, the man was seated behind his desk. His hands were clasped in front of him. There were no papers. They had been cleared away. A whiskey glass sat there, half full. And on Edmund's face, that familiar expression. The decision had been made. No negotiation. Eleanor stopped at the door. She did not sit. She had not been invited to. Edmund began. The Duke of Ashford wants to marry. Eleanor waited. He first asked for Cecily. A pause. Short. But Eleanor felt it and said nothing. But Cecily is young. She has a delicate nature. Edmund turned the glass in his hand. This marriage would destroy her. You're thinking of Cecily, Eleanor thought. Since when? You will go, said Edmund. The sentence had no beginning, no end. Just that. Eleanor took a step forward. Me. You. You are 24. You are strong. Edmund lifted his eyes. There was no regret, No apology in his gaze, only arithmetic. And Eleanor, no one was waiting for you anyway. The room fell silent. A log cracked in the fireplace. Eleanor wanted to speak. She opened her mouth. A word rose to her throat. But before it could emerge, Edmund continued, "If you make a sound, I will find a path for Cecily as well, a less gentle one." The word fell back, swallowed. Eleanor lowered her head, not to her father, but to the floor. For a single second. Then she raised it. When? Friday. 3 days. It happened as she was leaving the room. She had just reached the door, her hand on the handle, when her eyes caught on the corner of the desk. A paper, half hanging off the edge, as if left there in haste, or the thought came to Eleanor later, much later, deliberately left where it could be seen. She stopped, looked. Edmund was looking at his whiskey glass, not at her. Eleanor took the paper, slipped it into her pocket, walked out. In the corridor, alone, under the trembling light of gas lamps, she opened it. It was a promissory note, signed by Edmund Voss. Creditor, the Duke of Ashford. Amount, a small fortune. And in the lower corner, a small but clear note. The bride price will settle the debt within 5 days of receipt. Eleanor calculated. The bride price would be paid as soon as the marriage took place, and that money would go directly to the debts of the Voss estate, completely. Her father was selling his daughter, but Eleanor turned the paper over. Another document had been attached to the back. Thin, formal paper, sealed. She read it again, a third time. Then she stopped, because she understood. The document was in her name, prepared without her knowledge. An inheritance instrument. If the marriage took place, all debts of the Voss family would be transferred to Eleanor as her dowry, legally, formally. Her father was not selling his daughter. He was leaving her at the Duke's door with a suitcase full of debt. 1 stone, 2 birds, Eleanor thought. No sound to the thought, just a cold, clear conclusion. He would be rid of the debt. He would be rid of her. And when the Duke realized what he had taken, it would be too late. She looked at her hands. Were they trembling? No. Why were they not trembling? She put the documents back into her pocket. Both of them. In that moment, she did not fully know why she took them. Instinct, perhaps. Or the cold reason built from 8 years of stored anger. But she took them and went upstairs. Cecily was in her room. Eleanor opened the door slightly. Her sister was looking at herself in the mirror. She had braided her hair, disliked it, undone it, and was braiding it again. The words of a song on her lips. Silent, only the movement of them. Eleanor stood in the doorway, did not enter. She watched for a while. This innocence must be protected, she thought. But this time, the thought came differently, not soft as before, sharp, decisive, and I will protect it, but in my own way. Cecily saw her in the mirror, turned. Eleanor, will you help me braid my hair? Eleanor entered, stood behind her sister, took her hair. Fine, golden, like silk. Where are you going all dressed up like this? Nowhere. Cecily laughed. I'm just practicing. Eleanor began to braid, slowly, carefully. Cecily, If one day I have to go far away. She paused, continued. Everything will be all right. You know that, don't you? Cecily looked at her through the mirror. Her eyes widened, questions in them, but she did not ask. She only said, It won't be all right without you. Eleanor smiled, small, real. It will, she said. I promise. That night, while she was packing her suitcase, Edmund Voss left the house, heading to his club, as always. The door closed. Footsteps faded. Eleanor closed her suitcase, then opened it again, took the documents, both of them, and placed them at the very bottom, beneath the lining, closed it. She stood, looked at herself in the mirror. She was 24, tired, but in her eyes, that cold, clear, useful anger was still burning. I am going as a sacrifice, she thought. But sacrifices bow their heads. I will not. Sir Edmund Voss was at ease in his club that night. The plan was perfect. The girl would go. The debt would close. Cecily would be protected, and no one would ask anything. But Edmund had not accounted for one thing. Eleanor had taken the documents. And Eleanor Voss, who left nothing to chance, who had carried the truth of that house alone for 8 years, knew exactly why she had taken them. Not yet, but she would. When Ashford Castle first came into view, it took the breath away. That was not an exaggeration. It truly did. Because the castle was not only large, it was permanent. Its stones were centuries old. Its walls so thick, so deep, you felt that even sound could be swallowed within them. The gardens were orderly even in darkness. Trimmed trees, stone paths, a distant pool, silence frozen upon its surface. Eleanor looked through the carriage window. She felt nothing, or perhaps she did, but did not name it. The carriage did not turn toward the main entrance, but toward the right wing. A narrow, stone road. Service entrance. Eleanor noticed, said nothing. She was the first to step down, took her own suitcase. The footman did not reach to help. Inside, an older woman was waiting. Black dress, white apron, silver hair pulled tight. Her face was neutral, neither harsh nor kind, simply neutral. She had a task, and she was performing it. This way. The corridors were long, stone floors, stone walls, gas lamps at intervals. Enough light, no more. Eleanor counted. 7 corridors, 2 staircases, 1 door. Not locked, but heavy. The room was on the 3rd floor. It was not small. That surprised Eleanor. She had expected small, punishingly small. But it was not. A bed, a fireplace, a window overlooking the garden. Even in darkness, its order was visible. It was cold. The fireplace was not lit. The older woman paused at the door. The Duke does not wish to see you. Breakfast is at 8. Meals will be brought to your room. You will learn the rules. She turned, left. The door closed. Eleanor set her suitcase down, stood in the center of the room, looked out the window. Dark garden, distant pool, frozen water. Then she went to the fireplace. There were matches on the shelf. She lit it herself. She called no one. When dinner arrived, there was only one plate on the tray, half a portion. Eleanor looked at the tray for a long time. Then she opened the door. A young maid had not yet gone far. "Wait." The girl stopped, turned, uneasy eyes. "Take this tray back," said Eleanor. The girl blinked. "My lady? Bring a full portion, and wood for the fire." She paused. Her tone did not change, neither angry nor pleading, simply level. "I am not a guest here. I am the wife. Would you like to learn the difference now, or in the morning?" The girl, 16, perhaps 17, flushed cheeks, hesitated. Then, "I will learn now, my lady." She took the tray, left. 20 minutes later, she returned. Full portion, wood beside it. And the unease in her eyes had shifted into something else. Not quite respect, but close. Eleanor thanked her, closed the door. She ate, alone, at the small table before the fire. Then she cried, for a long time, silently. She lifted her hand to her mouth to stop the sound, then lowered it, realizing there was no need. These walls swallowed sound. She cried, for her mother, for Cecily, for 8 years, and for herself, least of all, but still. Then she stopped, wiped her face, stood, opened her suitcase, took out the documents. It was midnight. Eleanor was reading them again, third, fourth time, sitting on the floor before the fire, and something caught her attention. She had not seen it before, or had seen it, but not understood. There was a seal in the lower corner of the inheritance document, the Ashford seal. This document had not been prepared at the Voss estate. It had been prepared by the Duke's own solicitors. Edmund had signed it, yes, but the document itself was written by the Duke's men. The Duke knew about this arrangement. He knew everything. Eleanor slowly rose. Then why had he said, "I do not take sacrifices"? Why had he acted as if he were protecting her? There was no answer. Not yet. But the question was there. In the room. In the walls. In the sound of the fire. That night she opened the wrong door. By accident. Truly. She had stepped into the corridor for water, turned left instead of right. The door was heavy, but unlocked. She entered. A library. Vast, dark, endless. Books to the ceiling. A large table in the center, and at the head of it, in the light of a single candle, back to the door, the Duke of Ashford. He was not asleep. He held a letter, old. The paper yellowed, the folds whitened with use. A letter read many times. Eleanor stepped back, had taken one step when the floor creaked. The Duke turned. They looked at each other. Silence. Long, heavy, neither of them filling it. The Duke closed the letter, slowly, placed it on the table, turning it over, But too late. Eleanor had seen something. One word. In the upper corner. In a woman's handwriting. Margaret. Her mother's name. Eleanor stepped back, closed the door, stood in the corridor, leaned her back against the wall. Her hands were trembling now. For the first time, the Duke had known her mother, Margaret Voss, the woman who had had an accident 8 years ago. The doctor arriving late, Edmund arguing at the door. That Margaret. The Duke knew her. And that letter, that yellowed, worn letter, he had kept it all this time. Why? In the corridor at midnight, alone, Eleanor Voss stood. And for the first time, truly the first time, she was not thinking about how to leave this castle. She was thinking about what she would find inside it. Eleanor Voss did not sleep that night. She held the documents, thought of her mother's name, and of why the Duke had turned that letter over. By morning, she had made a decision. There were only 2 ways to leave this castle: defeated or knowing everything. And Eleanor Voss, who had stood alone for 8 years, who had sent back a half-portion tray, who had slipped her father's documents into her pocket without a word, had never been defeated. Breakfast was at 8, and the Duke would be at the table. In the breakfast room, the Duke sat alone. When Eleanor entered, he did not stand. He was looking at the newspaper, or pretending to. Eleanor noticed his eyes were not moving across the lines. She sat, not at the far end of the table, directly across from him. A servant brought tea. Eleanor thanked her. The Duke did not look up from the paper. 5 minutes passed. 10. Eleanor finished her tea, adjusted her plate. Then, what was my mother's name doing in that letter? The newspaper did not lower immediately. 1 second. 2. Then the Duke placed it on the table, slowly, looked at her. His eyes were the same as the night before, that controlled, cold, accumulated anger. Which letter? The one you held in the library at midnight, the one you turned over. Silence. The Duke stood, left the table, went to the window, looked out at the garden. For a long time he did not speak. Eleanor waited. She had learned that, to wait. The one who hurried spoke first. The one who spoke first lost first. At last the Duke turned. Finish your breakfast. Then come to my study. The study was smaller than the library, but it carried the same weight. There was nothing on the desk. The Duke opened a drawer and took out a file. Thick, bound, dated 1839, 8 years earlier, the year Eleanor's mother had died. The Duke placed the file on the desk, but did not open it. He sat across from Eleanor, folded his fingers on the table. You brought the documents with you, he said. It was not a question. Yes. Why? Eleanor took them from her pocket, both of them. She laid them on the desk. The promissory note and the inheritance instrument, smoothed them flat, pushed them toward the Duke. I should be asking that. The men who prepared this document are your solicitors. You knew about the arrangement. So why did you say last night, I do not take sacrifices? The Duke looked at the papers, then at Eleanor. And in that moment, Eleanor would think of it later, again and again. In that moment, something in the Duke's face broke. Small, almost invisible, but it broke, because the plan changed. He opened the drawer again. This time he took out 4 sheets of paper, arranged them neatly on the desk, in order, like a case file. "Your father, Sir Edmund Voss," said the Duke. His voice was level, like a barrister, like a judge, "has been committing small frauds for 14 years, forged notes, fictitious partnerships, inheritance manipulation." Eleanor looked at the papers. Numbers, names, dates. "Some of those schemes struck my family as well," said the Duke. "I was 12. My father sold half our lands in the north of England to pay those notes." He paused. Edmund Voss was a minor name then. No one took him seriously. I did. "You have been tracking him for 12 years? 14. Eleanor calculated. 14 years. The man had begun when he was 12, while his father was selling land, while he was still in school, while he was growing up. He had been tracking him. "And I," said Eleanor slowly, "am the final link." "No." The Duke pulled 1 page forward. "You are the trap's door. Edmund has to conclude this marriage to get the money. If he concludes it, every document, every forged signature, every witness, all of it goes before the court, legally. Because then this inheritance instrument opened in Eleanor Voss's name will also stand before the court, and Edmund is the man who signed it." Eleanor understood, not slowly, all at once. "You used me." Silence. "Yes," said the Duke. 1 word. No apology. No explanation. Only yes. Eleanor looked at the desk, at the papers, then at the Duke. "And what about me? When this is over, where am I in it? A used instrument?" The Duke stood, turned toward the window. The same motion as yesterday, but this time he waited longer. "At the beginning, yes, that was the plan. And now?" He turned back. "Now you are sitting here, holding the documents, asking me questions whose answers you already know." He paused. "I am not fool enough to underestimate you." The Duke turned toward the door. "Come in." A young footman entered. A folded letter on a silver tray. The Duke took it, opened it, read. His face did not change, but his eyes did. Something came into them. Not satisfaction, not exactly, but something close to it. He set the letter on the desk, turned to Eleanor. "The documents have reached London. The High Court is summoning Edmund Voss for questioning tomorrow morning." Eleanor drew a breath, deep, slow. "My mother," she said. "What is in that file?" The Duke returned to the desk, took the file, thick, dated, 8 years old, and placed it before Eleanor. He did not open it. His hand remained on top of it. "Margaret Voss did not have an accident 8 years ago," he said. "The doctor came late. You know that. But do you know why the doctor came late?" Eleanor waited. "Edmund Voss did not send for the doctor that night. The neighbor did. The woman who carried you to bed. By the time Edmund came home, his wife had been lying in bed for 2 hours, alone. The room spun. It did not spin. The room was fixed, stone, heavy, permanent. But something inside Eleanor turned. How do you know that? That neighbor, Mrs. Alderton, gave a statement. In 1840, Edmund's lawyers suppressed it. The Duke opened the file, went to the bottom, drew out a page. This is the original statement, not a copy. The original. Eleanor took the paper. It was handwritten, unsteady, old, but clear. Mrs. Alderton's signature at the bottom. Date, 14th of March, 1840. She read it, once, twice. Then she set it on the desk, folded her hands in her lap, her fingers locked together, white, tight. She did not cry, because anger would not allow it. That cold, clear, 8-year anger. Now it was colder, clearer. Will this go to court? If fraud charges are brought against Edmund Voss, and they will be, the prosecutor may also request this statement. The Duke paused. I can establish the necessary connections to make sure that happens. Why would you do that? The Duke waited a moment. Because Margaret Voss knew my mother. That night, Edmund Voss was at his London club. He was drinking whiskey. He was smiling, telling some story to the men beside him. Hands spread wide, expansive. The debts would be cleared. The girl had gone. Everything was in order. A waiter brought an envelope. Edmund opened it. A court summons. His smile froze. His hands dropped. The whiskey glass struck the table. Hard, uncontrolled. The men beside him looked over. Edmund stood, said nothing, walked toward the door. Outside, the air was cold. November Devonshire, stone pavement. He did not know where he was going, because the plan was over. And when the plan ended, Edmund Voss had only one thing left, the reckoning. Sir Edmund Voss did not sleep that night, but in the library of Ashford Castle, under a single candle, between 2 cups of cold tea, Eleanor Voss and the Duke of Ashford were speaking of Margaret Voss's 8-year silence. And as that silence came to an end, Eleanor closed the file on the table. The Duke waited. Eleanor lifted her head. "Why is your father's name not in this file?" she said. The Duke's eyes changed. "Because," he said, "his case is in a different file." The Devonshire paper came out every Wednesday. This was a Wednesday. Edmund Voss woke at 7 in the morning, or rather, one could not call it waking, because he had not slept. He had sat upright in bed, waiting in the dark, watching morning arrive. When gray light slipped through the window, he rose, dressed, went downstairs. The newspaper was at the front door, as always. Edmund took it, went into the sitting room, sat down, opened it. First page, news of the winter harvest. Second page, a new bridge project in London. Third page, Edmund stopped, his eyes fixed on a name. Small print, but clear. It was there. Sir Edmund Voss summoned to the High Court on allegations of document forgery and inheritance fraud. 1 paragraph, 5 sentences. No more. It was enough. Edmund folded the paper, set it on the table, placed his hands over it, as if the sheet might escape, as if holding it down could force the news back into silence. Then he let go, because nothing could be taken back now. The creditors came before noon. There were two of them, a solicitor and a court officer. They waited at the door. Edmund opened it, looked at their faces, said nothing. They entered. They had a list in their hands. Long, detailed, every line an object. Edmund stood in the sitting room and listened. They counted. Silver tea service, 12 pieces. Crystal goblets, 24. Oak desk in the study, Italian workmanship, 1821. Piano in the drawing room. "Do not touch the piano," said Edmund. The solicitor looked at his paper. "Sir, this list is under court order. That piano belongs to my daughter." A short silence. The solicitor said, "Which daughter, sir?" "Your elder daughter is now the Duchess of Ashford. Your younger daughter's name is on the list." "Enough." Edmund sat down. He had to. His knees would not hold him. The officer went to the piano, measured it, wrote something down, and at that exact moment, exactly then, Cecily came down the stairs. That morning Cecily had braided her hair, blonde, neat, tied with a pink ribbon, a novel in her hand. Every morning before breakfast she read a few pages. As she came down the steps, she did not at first understand what she was seeing. Strangers, a list, her father in a chair, sitting in a way Cecily had never seen before. Father? Edmund did not lift his head. The solicitor turned to Cecily, politely. "Miss, if you have personal belongings of your own, I would advise you to set them aside. The list, what is this?" Cecily looked at the solicitor, then at her father. "Father, what is this?" Edmund did not answer. Cecily stepped down once, then again, looked at the paper in the solicitor's hand. Silver tray, crystal, desk, piano. The piano too? Silence. And inside that silence, that heavy, shame-soaked silence, Cecily felt 18 years of innocence coming to an end. It was not a swift feeling. It came slowly, like a door closing slowly, irreversible, soundless, final. She pressed the book to her chest. "Where was Eleanor?" she said. It was not a question. All this time, Edmund lifted his head, looked at his daughter. He did not answer, because there was an answer. Edmund knew it. Eleanor had been everywhere. In the kitchen, in the corridors, at the table, inside the accounts, beneath every small invisible act that had kept this house looking intact. And Edmund had taken her, with her suitcase, and sent her to a stranger's door. Cecily looked away from her father. She did not look at him again. The court notice arrived that afternoon. Edmund Voss was to appear before the High Court the following morning. The Margaret Voss case, buried, suppressed, forgotten, 8 years ago, was being reopened. The prosecution had requested additional evidence, Mrs. Alderton's testimony. Edmund read the document in his hand, then read it again, then placed it on the table. He went to the window. The garden was visible. trimmed hedges, orderly paths. It had always looked this way. From the outside, everything in its place. From the inside, everything had long since collapsed. He had simply chosen not to see it. Eleanor did this, he thought, but how? She left with a single suitcase. What could she possibly have had? And with that thought, with that exact question, Edmund Voss understood. The documents, the ones he had taken out, left visible, or believed he had left visible. The promissory note, the inheritance instrument. Eleanor had taken them, and she had carried them to the Duke. Edmund laughed. A short, sharp, hollow laugh. He had turned his own plan into his own ruin. That morning at Ashford Castle, Eleanor stood by the window. She was looking at the garden, the Duke's garden, ordered, vast, enduring. In the distance, the pool. The ice upon it had begun to melt. A thin line, dark water, bright ice. A knock at the door. "Come in." The Duke entered, a paper in his hand, a telegram. "Edmund Voss appeared in court this morning," he said. "His lawyer requested a delay. It was denied." Eleanor did not turn from the window. The Margaret Voss case? The prosecution requested it. It was granted. Hearing in January. Silence. Eleanor counted inwardly. 8 years. 8 years ago, on a January night, her mother had lain alone in bed while Edmund argued over the doctor's fee at the door. In January, there would be an accounting. "Cecily," said Eleanor, "will she be protected during this process?" "Cecily Voss is not a party to the case. She will not be affected. Financially." The Duke stepped further into the room. "My solicitor is preparing a separate protection instrument in Cecily Voss's name. Certain items from the estate, including the piano, will be left to her." Eleanor turned. There was something in her eyes. Not a question, a conclusion. "Why are you doing so much?" The Duke did not answer immediately. He looked toward the window. The same garden, the same thawing ice. "Because Margaret Voss wrote a letter to my mother," he said, "in 1838. She explained what Edmund was. She asked for help." He paused. "My mother did not give me that letter, did not even show it to me, did not tell me. Why? Because she said, 'One does not interfere in such matters. Another man's house, another man's concern.'" His voice did not change, but something within it did. "My mother died in 1841. I found the letter afterward, and Margaret Voss had died in 1839. Eleanor quote, or understood. 1 year. The letter had been written in 1838. If help had come, if it had come 1 year earlier, "This is not your fault," said Eleanor. "No," said the Duke, "but it is easy to carry." That week, Cecily came to Ashford Castle. She came alone, with a small suitcase, her eyes swollen, but her voice steady. Eleanor met her at the door. The two sisters looked at each other. Cecily tried to speak, opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Then, "Why didn't you tell me?" "Tell you what?" "Everything. The debts. Father." She stopped. "What father is?" Eleanor stepped closer, reached out, touched Cecily's face, moved a strand of her blonde hair behind her ear, as she had when they were children. "Because you were singing," she said, "and I wanted you to keep singing. A little longer." Cecily cried. Eleanor held her. In the great entrance hall, on the stone floor, the two sisters stood together, and Eleanor, who had not cried for 8 years, who had stood upright on her anger, felt something this time. It was not tears. Something lighter. Something new. "It's over," she thought. "This part is over." Sir Edmund Voss appeared on the 3rd page of the newspaper that Wednesday morning. Small print. 5 sentences. But in Devonshire, everyone read it. At the club, in the market, in neighboring estates, everyone, and everyone knew, the difference between looking wealthy and being wealthy could sometimes collapse in a single morning's paper. Edmund Voss had built for 40 years. Eleanor Voss had undone it with 1 suitcase and 2 documents. And in the great library of Ashford Castle, between 2 cups of tea, an open file, and Margaret Voss's 8-year silence, 2 people were slowly learning each other's language. It was not yet love. But this was exactly where love begins. When one person sees the weight the other has been carrying, and after silence, chooses to speak. By April, Ashford Castle had changed, or perhaps it had not. The stones were the same, the walls the same, the corridors the same, but the air within it was different, lighter, as if something a century old had dissolved, like the thawing ice of the pool, slow, silent, irreversible. Eleanor was in the library. Early morning, before breakfast, she came here every day. She chose books, sometimes read them, sometimes only held them. This morning she sat in a chair near the window. The garden was visible, the pool now fully thawed, the water shining. Footsteps, familiar, heavy, measured, unhurried. The Duke entered, 2 cups of tea in his hands. He had carried them himself. Eleanor noticed, said nothing. He handed her a cup. She took it. He sat opposite her. For a long time, neither spoke. They looked at the garden, together, but separately. Not everything between them had been said. Perhaps it never would be. Some things do not need to be spoken. At last the Duke said, "How do you feel?" Eleanor looked at her cup, thought, truly thought, did not answer quickly. "At my mother's funeral 8 years ago, I did not cry," she said. They were surprised. The neighbors, distant relatives. They called me cold-hearted behind my back. I heard them. The Duke waited. "I am not crying now either, but this time the reason is different." "Why?" Eleanor looked out the window, at the pool, at the shining water. "Because the anger is gone," she said. "I carried it for 8 years. It was the first thing I felt when I woke. The last thing before I slept. In every small decision, in the kitchen, on the stairs, at my father's door, it was always there, like fuel." She paused. "What happens when the fuel runs out?" said the Duke. Eleanor turned, looked at him, directly, steadily. "You find out what remains." That week, Cecily was in the garden. She had not moved into Ashford Castle. Eleanor had wanted her to build her own life. But she came every week. Sometimes stayed 2 days, sometimes 3. That morning she walked alone, a novel in her hand, pausing now and then to look at the flowers. Her blonde hair shone in the sun. Her cheeks were still pink, but her eyes had changed. Deeper, knowing. Eleanor watched her from the window. Footsteps beside her. The Duke had approached. He too was looking at the garden. "She looks well," said the Duke. "Strong," said Eleanor. "She always was. She just didn't know it." A brief silence. "Like you," said the Duke. Eleanor did not answer, but at the corner of her mouth, the right corner, something appeared. Not quite a smile, but close. Edmund Voss lasted 5 minutes in court. His lawyer had come early that morning to the estate, emptied, cold, curtains drawn. They had met at the door, and the lawyer had said only one thing: "The evidence is too strong, sir. To fight it would mean to lose more." Edmund had understood. In court, he had stood before the judge. His lawyer spoke for him. Edmund simply sat, upright, silent, empty. His club membership was gone. The estate was gone. His name, 40 years of it in Devonshire, ruined in 5 sentences on the 3rd page. The Margaret Voss case would be heard separately. In January, even his lawyer had offered no hope for that one. As Edmund left the courtroom, no one greeted him. Familiar faces were there, from the club, from the neighborhood, from old partnerships. All looked away. Because that was the difference between appearing wealthy and being wealthy. When the appearance vanished, nothing remained. That afternoon, Eleanor went to the Duke's study. She knocked this time. "Come in." She entered, stood before the desk. "I need to ask you something," she said. The Duke set down his pen, waited. "If I am to remain in this house," she paused, then began again. "I know how this marriage began. I know the plan. But now..." Her eyes were steady. "I want to know what it is now." The Duke stood, walked around the desk, unhurried, deliberate, stopped before her. 2 steps between them, not too close, not too far. "At the beginning, I saw you as an instrument," he said. "That is true. I will not apologize, because an apology would not be enough." Eleanor waited, but when you entered that hall, with a single suitcase, through a side door, no one speaking your name, and you did not bow your head, he paused. "That is when the plan changed." "Why?" "Because I have spent years watching people break. I watched your father. I watched my own family. And those who do not break, truly do not break. I can count on one hand." Silence. "You did not break," said the Duke. "With one suitcase, through a side door, with no one beside you. You did not break." Something moved inside Eleanor. She wanted to recognize it, to name it, but it came too early. "That is not an answer," she said. The Duke, for the first time, with a full, real smile. "No," he said, "but it is a beginning." That evening, the 3 of them dined together. Eleanor, Gabriel. That was the Duke's name. Eleanor had learned it that day, used it silently for the first time. And Cecily. At the great dining table, beneath crystal chandeliers, with silver cutlery, Cecily spoke, quickly, brightly, laughing. She told them about a bird she had seen in the garden, a character from her novel, an old atlas she had discovered in the library. Eleanor listened. Gabriel listened. And at that table, that great, heavy, century-old table, something happened. Small, almost invisible. But Eleanor felt it. Home, she thought. This feels like a home. Divine justice does not always arrive in a courtroom. Sometimes it comes in a single piece of paper, held in a woman's hand, quietly slipped into her pocket, told to no one. Sometimes it comes at the end of 8 years of anger, when that anger is gone, and only what remains is left behind. And sometimes it comes by entering through a side door and leaving through the front. Eleanor Voss had gone as a sacrifice. She remained as the Duchess of Ashford. Edmund Voss had built for 40 years. It ended in 5 sentences in a morning paper. Cecily continued to sing, without a piano, but freely. And in the library of Ashford Castle, on a spring night, under a single candle, 2 people continued, slowly, to learn each other's language. There was no need to hurry. For the first time, time was on their side. Thank you for staying with the story all the way to its end. We would love to know where you're listening from. Please share your city in the comments, as we truly enjoy reading every one of them. If you found yourself drawn into the story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the next one.